Welcome to Terror in Tandem, a podcast about finding entertainment in the macabre. Each week we discuss the horror genre, from books to film to TV and beyond, sometimes even from the beyond. Hosted by the knowledgeable and lovable Laura and Richard Mathiasen.
Hello.
That's us.
That's me. Or that's us.
It's both of us.
It is.
I'm the Laura of the Laura and Richard.
And I am the Richard of the Richard.
Yeah, of course you are. Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is our first episode, and we're really excited to be here with you all.
It's our first episode of our first podcast of our,
first lives on this earth.
pretty much.
That we know of.
As far as we know. Yeah.
Just
Sometimes
a quick
doesn't
shout
feel like
out to Zoom Game Night, folks.
Yeah.
Thank you for this idea.
The
It
inspiration.
was our idea.
And
They
the
told
idea,
us to do it, and I ran with it.
The idea, the brilliance, the creativity, the magnificence,
all me.
the charm. That's all us. Mostly you.
Mostly me.
A little bit me.
And I brought it up on Zoom Game
But
Night,
mostly you.
and they said, "Go. Why don't you just do it?"
Yeah,
maybe
the
it
mistake
was like,
we made was we mentioned the idea.
"Why
in
don't you
front of
just
our
do it
friends.
already? We're tired of hearing it." Maybe it was that. I don't know. It could have been. And I was like, "Oh, you don't think I can? Well, I'm gonna prove it to you."
I like to think it was our passion for the horror genre,
Right.
and
Oh,
our
yes.
desire to share it with the world,
We're
rather
so
than
excited to be
like,
here with you.
keeping up with Zoom Game Night.
We
Anyway,
love Zoom Game Nights.
So what is this pod?
I mean, just if you loop back to the beginning, it's a podcast about finding entertainment in the macabre.
Anyway, so what this is two people, myself and my wife Laura, just two people who really love horror, having kind of a celebration of the genre. Movies, books, art, video games, whatever form it takes. This is, like a lighthearted discussion, recommendations, bringing people in, celebrating with the people that are already weirdos like us. We're really not here to shit on anything or talk about stuff that we don't like. I mean, we'll be critical when necessary, but
We just want anyone who might be interested in horror or who already is interested in horror to find something interesting and exciting about
like
this
maybe
pod.
an entryway. It's just
A
something we
gateway,
enjoy and want to share.
portal.
A portal, a hellmouth.
But we want, honestly, my hope is that you will be entertained, that you will come back and listen to what we have to share, and that maybe you'll learn something new or want to try something new.
And my hope is that this records without one of us sounding like we're underwater in a tunnel.
Yeah, good luck. If it does, then, just bear with us. We'll figure it out,
We
okay?
will
Maybe the first couple of
probably figure it
episodes
out.
won't sound perfect, but
I mean,
we're working on it.
It's
We're
not for
recording from one of our many apartments,
Yes.
and this particular space that we're in.
You should say luxury properties is more accurate.
Right. One of our luxury
A multitude
properties.
of luxury properties.
This particular space, you might hear something
Yeah.
other than our voices, is what I mean.
It's what I might describe as a luxury deluxe suite VIP 1 bedroom 1 bath apartment.
There might be a ghost in the machine.
Yeah, exactly. Or a cat.
So our
equally
first,
as evil.
Our first episode is really, it's introducing us, but it's also introducing you, listener, and you know who you are.
Our one
Yeah,
singular
thank you.
listener.
Thank you for listening. I
Thank
mean, I
you.
know we forced you into it
We did,
by
and
the threat of no longer allowing
we
you in
promise we
any of
will
our luxury
feed you eventually.
properties.
Probably.
Well, yeah, I know. Like, we'll do our best to
Yeah.
feed you. But this episode is an introduction of who we are, but also of an introduction to horror. We want to say, hey, everyone, let's introduce you to the horror genre in a gentle way. Like, let's take our skeleton finger and
let's see
motion
where
you
this is
towards
going.
us.
Okay. What are we doing with our skeletal finger?
Motioning
Motioning.
them
Okay.
towards us.
In a little coquettish way, I can see.
Can you close your eyes, listener? I want you to visualize an extended,
especially
white,
if you're walking. Close your eyes.
long, bony skeleton hand with an extended index finger, and
Yes.
it is motioning. Now it's moving. It's motioning you towards us. I mean, I wish you could see because I'm actually doing.
Yeah, she is really doing it. I mean,
I'm
I might
pantomiming
need to
it.
explain the limits of the podcast medium
Right.
later.
I don't think we're going to go to video. Can we just agree now
God.
that we are not going to be videoizing
I don't
this?
understand why anyone does.
I mean,
isn't the magic of doing a podcast that no one has to look at you?
Yeah, I have a face for a pod.
I mean, obviously, I am decked out to the nines.
I have
look
the
amazing.
face for a pod. I can't believe I didn't get
pod face.
any laughs. Well,
You have pod face.
I have a face for a podcast.
Yeah, I think in the medical community that's known as pod face.
Well, Howard Stern always jokes that he has a face for radio, and he does.
He does.
But he records now.
A beautiful face made for radio.
Okay, so this is our introduction episode.
Yeah.
Introductory and introductions.
One of the things we thought about when we were going back on this idea is our own personal introduction to the genre and how we might bring people in while still being respectful of their limitations. Because getting someone into horror can be a little tricky, as you're essentially trying to get them into something that not a lot of people from the outside understand. I mean, we
or might
find,
scare them.
yeah,
Or might be
gross them out.
taboo.
Yeah,
Or,
Bring up
if
some-
you have kids, you
might trigger them
yeah, well,
depending on the movie.
you might want to, there might be a limited time for you to watch or, read something on your own. Like a lot of people with kids are watching, family-oriented movies or reading books to their kids at night.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they might not have enough time while their children are engaged and awake to think about this. And we've thought about it for you. So when you have that hour before bed, why not try one of
Why
what
not
we suggest?
spend it scaring
of our
the shit out of
suggestions.
yourself? Is what I say.
No, because this is an introduction.
Yeah.
We don't want to scare people away.
All right.
We
Scare
want to
scare like a shart. out of
whet
yourself.
their
like
appetite.
like a fart with a little bit of spray.
Oh God, this is not that type of podcast,
Okay, I'm sorry.
listeners.
We're still working out what
Or
kind
listener,
of podcast
I'm
it
sorry.
is. So there'll be some things that maybe we work on.
So what Richard, you brought up a great point where you said,
I did. Oh my
let's
God.
talk about how we were introduced to
Yeah.
horror.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So
You wanna start?
sure.
What brought you to the dark side?
So how I was introduced to horror, I honestly introduced myself. I said, hello, horror. My name is Laura, and I will have a
bold move.
future podcast about you. No, my childhood, my hometown library had two sides. And in the back of the building was the police station, which we'll get into that in a future episode. Anyway,
That's interesting.
yeah. So in my town, the local library had a side on the right. You walk in, and it was actually divided. So you didn't walk into the main library door. You just walked into the main building door. And then on the right, you walked into the children's library. So obviously, as a child, you're really not able to go into the adult side alone. I don't even know if there could have been a sign like must be accompanied
Did you ever
by an adult.
accidentally walk into the police station and be like,
No,
oh,
because
God.
it was all the way in the back of the building. You had to do it with purpose.
Okay.
So
And they weren't like dragging perps through the library to get to the police station. Like they had their own entrance.
I mean, I don't even know what
I'm sorry, I can't
perp.
get past this.
I don't know what perp they would drag into my hometown police station. Like, obviously, I spent most of my childhood in the right side, and then when I was old enough to go into the left side, finally, I beelined right for Helter Skelter. And
Why? Why Helter Skelter? Did you know about it before? Had you heard about it?
yeah, I had. And I honestly, maybe the Phil Donahue show is where I heard of it.
Wow.
Yeah. I
Hell
mean,
yeah.
I'm not gonna mince words. I did watch the Phil Donahue show.
Oh.
With my grandparents, my grandmother.
This is a horror
specifically.
podcast, so that fits.
Helter Skelter, and then I believe Carrie.
Nice.
Stephen King's Carrie. Yeah. I just was so fascinated with not being able to, I guess. You know, there's always been this shroud around horror where, oh, it's too young. You're too young, or, you know, you close your eyes or cover your eyes.
I feel like a lot of that also was I think the prevailing mentality of the generation that raised us was very much like prohibiting things.
Yeah.
Which only increased the allure for me.
Right.
The moment you prohibit something for me is the moment I become obsessed with it.
I mean, listen, it could have been, you know, memory is not always reliable, but I can visualize where the true crime books were in the adult section of the library. I don't remember going into the adult section of the library for any other books except horror.
And they've got that sort of forbidden mystique to them. You know, like there's this part of you that feels like, oh, should I be doing this?
Right. And like, you know, am I going to get in trouble for this? And I do remember reading and then becoming so fascinated by these types of books, like true crime and small town fictionalized horror. Nice. That from Stephen King especially, because it was so relatable.
I mean, he really has a knack for creating a world, a relatable world that you know kind of looks like yours, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So how did you get introduced to horror?
So I think the honestly the earliest thing I can remember is walking into the den or whatever, and my parents had an old, you know, big boxy TV. This is the 80s. Inside a cabinet. There's another thing my parents' generation that was really into is putting TVs in cabinets that you could close the doors on.
Armoire.
Yeah, right. So I walked into the room and all the adults were watching a movie trailer, and it was for Child's Play, and no one noticed I was there, and I saw the whole thing, and at the time I was holding my new My Buddy doll, which for anybody under the age of, you know, a million, Chucky is the good guy doll in the movie, and they modeled that after a real doll called the My Buddy doll.
Did you throw My Buddy?
Well, the thing is I must have gasped or made a noise or something because I saw the doll I was holding, my friend, my buddy, doing terrible things to these people on TV and saying awful things. And I was like, how could you? And my parents, you know, I remember they rushed up and closed the cabinets, the doors, but they didn't turn the TV off. So all I could hear was screaming coming from the cabinet, and it just made it worse. And then that night, I was at one end of the bed with my, you know, like crunched up, and My Buddy doll was at the other end of the bed. And I think the next day my dad made the connection when he saw me like all bleary-eyed. I hadn't slept a wink. And they got rid of the My Buddy doll. But that was my earliest memory. But honestly, my real introduction to horror came through being raised in a very, very hardcore Catholic family. You know, for anyone unfamiliar, the Bible is pretty scary. It's
interesting because we were both, I would say, similarly raised as far as churchgoers. Sure. My vibes in church was always hypocrisy and humor. Like, I just thought the whole experience of it was just so ridiculous, and yours was of like fear.
Oh yeah, mine was like very much around haunting. Punishment and damnation. Yeah, because my parents went from like fundamentalist Catholicism to born again Christianity for a few years, which just to give you an idea of what that was like in terms of intensity, when they went back to their hardcore Catholicism, it was a relief. So, but anyway, the point is there's a lot of talk about the devil I mean,
yeah, it still scares you to this
the
day.
devil was constant. And what I remember most was anytime the devil came up, the adults in the room visibly got afraid. And that blew my mind.
I just
'cause I wasn't.
Audience, listener, I just made a complete and utter breakthrough. Your fear, most of your fear when you watch current horror, the things that scare you the most are religious based.
Oh, for
spiritual.
Sure. 100%.
The things that scare me the most are things that could really happen.
Yes.
Real, real darkness in humanity.
We'll get into like all that.
But that's amazing because everybody,
that's what this pod
is
it's horror discussion and marriage breakthroughs.
And also like what scares you can be something that also entertains you.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting
well,
putting yourself in dangerous situations. I'm saying be entertained
by being scared.
Exactly.
And horror, I mean, getting back to why, I mean, it feeds, I think, a primal instinct, a need that we all have, that fine line between fear and elation in a completely safe, no stakes way. You're sitting on the couch, you can experience all the thrill of being afraid, and you're not going to get hurt. Nothing's going to happen to you.
Horror in the safety of your own safe space, essentially.
Exactly.
And you can control it, and that's what I like about it, is that you can control, the visual, the reading. So we have some intro recommendations for people.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to wrap up what I was saying. What I mean by religion as an introduction to horror is it was the idea of Satan and the adversary and the devil. It wasn't a distant idea. It wasn't philosophical. It was, he's here, he's ever present, he's always after you, and you have to be vigilant. And being told that from a young age, it was scary, it was thrilling. And then also as I started to get older and notice I didn't feel any of that, it was, I don't know, it just made me curious.
And mine was like, that creepy guy that with the greasy hair in your hometown that's constantly riding the bike around at night and he never speaks to anybody.
Yeah.
He probably has
like
bodies
Skip.
in his basement.
Yeah.
So.
Or Scooter.
Yeah.
Yeah. For sure. Well.
So, I'm happy to start.
I mean, why don't we take a quick break? Yeah. Before we get into the
recommendations.
Meat.
Yeah.
Dripping bloody meat of the
No, we're not
episode.
going to recommend bloody meat
No.
for those vegans that are listening. Bloody
brought to you by Bloody
corn.
So yeah, we're going to take a little break, play an ad from one of our sponsors, which helps us pay for our many luxury homes.
Yes, exactly. It's a mortgage payment.
Hopefully
enjoy.
Our listener is still there. Hope you're still there. And we're back.
Hi.
Hey.
Welcome back.
All right. That was, I mean, buy whatever that was, and a lot of it. And
I took a very long break then. So I think we should just jump into it, and I'm going to start.
All right. What we're doing is we're making recommendations, and specifically what we're recommending who we're recommending to are the group that are horror curious. You're open to the idea. You don't have a lot of experience, and you're a little nervous about it, but you're not closed off to it. You're not repulsed.
It's for the people that say, "Oh, I don't like scary movies,"
But
or "I don't like
maybe they
being
want
scared."
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is something that, why don't you give it a try? Any of these recommendations, why don't you just try it? Because we are guiding you gently.
The trick is, also with when you're introducing somebody to horror, I've learned this the hard way. You really don't want to turn them off right at the beginning. Right. It's like making a mixtape for someone.
Find your niche within horror.
And also respect the other person's sensibilities. Honestly, if you can, have a conversation with them first.
Or listen, if you don't want to do any of these recommendations, you just want to keep listening to the podcast, happy to have you.
Yeah, for sure.
I will entertain you all day with my antics.
Antics for days.
And my anecdotes.
Shenanigans.
And my anti-venom.
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump right in.
I thought the coffee tasted weird.
Yes. That's interesting that you bring up, that idea of poison.
Oh.
Because of what I'm about to recommend.
All right. Let's go for it. Jump right in.
It's the by proxy part.
Munchausen by proxy?
Yep.
Oh, my fave.
Takes place in this movie that I'm going to recommend. So
excellent.
My first recommendation, and it's an older film, and I'm sure you've heard about it and heard of it, and maybe you've watched it, maybe not, is The Sixth Sense.
Oh, I know exactly. Munchausen, but I know exactly the scene you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
I remember the exact moment I first saw it in the theater. It scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
I jumped.
It's scary, but I would say it's not overly violent.
No.
They don't use it.
That actually might be the scariest moment of the movie.
It's from 1999, written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan. It was my first introduction, and I think it was his introductory.
It wasn't his first film, but it was
mainstream.
It was his breakout for sure. I think it might have only been his second movie.
Starring Haley Joel Osment and Bruce Willis.
Bruce Willis in one of his best roles.
Yes. Oh my God, so good. And this sort of kicks off a bit of a trilogy for the Bruce Willis character, right?
No, you're thinking Unbreakable.
And so that character that Bruce Willis plays in Sixth Sense is different than Unbreakable?
Yeah. That's okay. Unbreakable, Split, and Glass is the trilogy.
Let's just cut that out. So, essentially the film tells the story of Cole, who's a child, Haley Joel Osment's role. He's isolated. He's struggling emotionally, and he's able to talk and see dead people. And then he is
just
helped.
Like regular people.
Yeah, he his mom has a child psychologist come in,
played by Toni Collette.
Yes,
and listener, if you stick around,
she's a darling of horror.
You're going to be hearing a lot about Toni Collette.
Yeah, she is. I would say the contemporary Jamie Lee Curtis of horror.
Yeah, the Queen, the Ellen Burstyn, the Jamie Lee Curtis, the Barbara Crampton, all rolled into one. She is the best.
So, Bruce Willis is a child psychologist who tries to help Cole deal with some of his psychosis and issues. It was nominated for 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture.
Not something that happens often with
No,
horror.
It doesn't. So
happening a little bit more these days.
I should say that should allude to the quality of the film. The writing, the cinematography, the overall cinematic vibe of the film.
It's got a budget.
Yeah,
sure,
it does. And
sure.
It's well done, well acted. And I think you should give it a try if it's something that you're interested in.
And shout out to Donnie Wahlberg, who
is
has a small role
unrecognizable
and is dope. He's real good.
I mean, you brought it up, so I'm gonna say it. I downloaded this podcast. I love podcasts. I downloaded this podcast. Had no idea it was about Amityville Horror. just recently. It's brand new. It's just like a revisiting of it. And the intro of the first episode was pretty lengthy. It was laying the groundwork, and the host was, talking. And then they were like, this is very scary people with your host, Donnie Wahlberg. And I almost drove off the road. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
If I can combine my childhood crush with my childhood horror experiences, because Amityville, I mean, it's a legit real
For
story.
sure. I mean,
happened.
I'm from Long Island. I've been there.
Yeah.
I know.
I just was overwhelmed, and I called
the Lutzes,
everybody
the
that
DeFeos.
would care.
I mean, I don't know them personally.
No.
But
I called
you can't
everybody
be
I
from
knew.
Long Island. Yeah. So
Anyway, shout out to Donnie Wahlberg.
and shout out to successful celebrities with their own podcast that apparently we'll be plugging on ours.
Hey, listen, if this gets a mention,
Yeah, we're talking about stuff we like.
yeah, it's connecting. We're making connections. Yeah.
If you have to go,
What's your
Wahlberg,
first recommendation?
Go Donnie.
That's the truth right there.
For sure.
If ever truth was spoken.
Well, it had to happen eventually. So yeah, my first recommendation. You said yours was a little older. I'm going way back, back to 1982. Poltergeist.
A young Craig T. Nelson
And a young Jo Beth Williams. Both smoking weed, being awesome parents, and yeah. So listen. Well, I mean,
debatable whether they were awesome parents.
She straight up jumps into a hell dimension because a 4-foot-tall Southern lady tells her to.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna put that in the, that's the good mom, good
Sure.
momming right
Absolutely.
there.
They did buy that house though.
Yeah, they didn't know. Anyway, so Poltergeist. The reason I'm recommending it is it's something I like to call full spectrum horror. It has something for everybody. It's got haunted house. It's got mediums, possession, ghosts, zombies. It's got some body horror.
Oh my.
It's got sci-fi, great special effects. It's got kind of an 80s Goonies vibe to it as well. It is also one of those wonderful movies that this happened a lot in this time period, like the early to mid 80s. It's a movie that really skirts the line of like, is this okay for kids? Ultimately, I say yes.
Well, I remember they played it in a double feature at the drive-in theater, Poltergeist and Close Encounters.
Well, it was rated PG because PG-13 didn't exist back then. And
I saw it with my parents at the drive-in theater.
It's one of the movies that led to the creation. I think it was around this time they started having the conversation of like, do we need a new classification of movie? Because it's one of those movies that you watch it when you're a kid and it sticks with you because it's just right on the edge. It's very scary, but it's not traumatizing.
No, it's going to stick with you.
But it's not going to fuck you up for life. Like The Exorcist, which
listen, listener,
is my
favorite movie. If you're not
movie.
fucked up for life right now.
Oh yeah, just stop listening.
I mean, this isn't gonna fuck you up for life. I mean, I don't know anybody that doesn't have at least something.
If you have been awake for the last like 7 or 8 years and aren't fucked up, like congratulations on your psychopathy. Anyway, so
That's
getting back to Poltergeist, like it's a great entryway. It's something everyone can enjoy. The remake with Sam Rockwell wasn't bad. It just doesn't have the heart of the original. Go with the original. And also, shout out to Tobe Hooper, just directed by Tobe Hooper. Was one of those guys, contemporary of Wes Craven, George Romero, John Carpenter, really just never got the, I think, recognition he deserved. He directed the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Eaten Alive, Life Force. I mean, a real master of the genre, hugely influential, but not often brought up in those conversations. So Poltergeist can't go wrong.
And I would say it was the first movie that I saw a commentary on the ability of screens to poison you.
It's
you know,
also,
essentially.
It's also got something to say about affordable housing, about urban
development,
suburban development, about white flight, things like that. I mean, there's some subversion in there. It's just great. It's a movie you can watch over and over and over again. It's got a scary ass clown in it too. Like I'm saying, there's something for everybody, and it's a blast seeing a young Craig T. Nelson and Joe Both Williams.
It's very
ass.
gooey and moist.
Zelda Rubinstein is iconic.
So if like sloshing and moist sounds and
there's
goo,
a bit of that.
You know, if that's something, just know.
I like a little goo in my horror.
Yeah.
You know, a little juice.
Yeah.
So that's my first recommendation. And you know what?
Excellent.
If you're watching it with your kids, it's retro. I mean, it's retro for me, and I was born in the 80s.
I mean, it could be laughable to them now.
I doubt it. It holds up, though. It's still really good. Produced by Steven Spielberg, and it definitely feels like it.
So my second recommendation is It Follows.
Nice.
2014, written and directed by David Robert Mitchell.
Love it.
So it's a college student who dates a guy. They hook up and have sex, and then he disappears from her life.
I've literally never heard of a thing like that happening. That's
ladies, am I right?
It's unbelievable. I can't.
Gentlemen, am I right? I
can't even
listen,
imagine.
Come on, love him and leave him.
I was more the if that ever even happened to me, wanted to just stay around all the time and talk about sci-fi.
Yeah, no ex-girlfriends write in, okay? Before he leaves her, though, he does tell her,
oh my
guess
God.
what? I cursed you. And this student, this girl, her name's Jay. She's played by Micah
Monroe.
Micah Monroe.
Yeah, she's great.
She's stalked by a being that can take on the appearance of any person.
And only she can see
Only
it, right?
she can see it, yeah. And if it catches her,
you fucked.
You're done. You're done, sister.
Not in the way that you did to get it to follow you in the first place.
She has to figure out how the curse is given and received. She has to pass it on to somebody else because only one person can have it at a time.
So if you give it to someone, it stops following you and follows them?
Correct.
It's kind of fucked up.
It's unsettling, a touch violent, but I mean, there's a touch of violence, but it's mostly unsettling.
It is so
It's a
scary.
ghost story of sorts.
It's a
because
little
of the
slow
curse.
burn.
Yeah, it's a slow burn, but like it's a ghost story. There's a haunting element, like a zombie-like follower.
And to anyone who has seen it, there are a couple of scenes that just stick with you. I'm thinking of them right now.
Yeah, me too. So it takes a typical adolescent experience that creates horror around it, which is something that I commonly attach myself to, of being afraid of.
Like in It Follows?
Well, yeah, like real life horror.
Mm-hmm.
And then, this fleeting intimate connection that you have with somebody at an age where every emotion is like so super surfaced and heightened.
Yeah.
That there's like a desperation in the movie, you
Sure.
know? Although it is a little slow burn, that intensity is really prevalent, I think.
Once it picks up, it doesn't stop.
And the vibe too, it's very John Carpenter, and we are gonna have a deep dive on John Carpenter
we'll be
in an
getting
episode
into
in
John
the future.
Carpenter, for sure.
And there's a cinematic quality to this film that's very reminiscent of John Carpenter.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it takes place in modern
out.
times, but it does have a throwback feel to it, which is much appreciated. I agree with you that some of the most lasting and best horror is allegorical. It speaks to a universal experience and has something more to say than just violence or scares for the sake of being scary. That's the stuff that really sticks with you. I mean, you can't go wrong with It Follows. It's a great recommendation. Am I next?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. So mine's a double bill. All right. So we're going with a book that was turned into a movie. So the book is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark by Alvin Schwartz. You've probably heard of it because it's famous and amazing. It was banned when it was first published. It's still banned in a lot of areas, and I'll just take a guess what kind of areas. But For me,
I've never watched or read this.
for real? You've never even read it?
No. Nope.
What?
Nope.
Oh, okay, we're gonna have to fix that. It is. It's amazing. So it's a young adult borderline children's book of scary stories to tell in the dark. It's a title that means it is what it means. But the reason I got my hands on it as a kid was because I think my parents mistook it for like a Shel Silverstein book because it's got sort of like a similar style to it, and so they thought it was like
where the sidewalk meets death,
where the sidewalk ends in hell. So they bought it for me, and I read it cover to cover a million times before they realized the mistake they made, and literally burned it.
They did?
Oh yeah, on the Barbie, and made me watch it. We'll get more into that.
No, we won't.
Maybe that's a different podcast.
Yeah,
but so actually,
BetterHelp.com.
the night that they found out, it was a night that my dad was reading to me, and I think I asked to have something read about scary stories to tell in the dark, and he sort of looked at it, and it was like halfway through the story. My favorite one about the ghost that's missing its toe. I think I can remember this look on his face where he realized halfway through telling it, like, oh, I've made a huge mistake. Whoops.
I mean, it wouldn't be much different than Grimm's fairy tales, which
no, honestly, it's way less
books.
Disturbing than Grimm's fairy tales or any old school, Eastern European children's folk tale. It's way less scary or fucked up than like a Hans Christian Andersen children's tale, but it's awesome. It's a great collection.
Wait.
Alvin Schwartz also illustrates it, and his style it's rough. It's in inks, and it really just fits the stories he's telling. So this was also adapted in 2019 by Norwegian director, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, Andre Overdal. Sorry if I'm messing that up. Really good director. He previously did Autopsy of Jane Doe, which I know, Laura, you and I really enjoyed. Mm-hmm. Also did Troll Hunter, which I don't know if you've seen.
No, I don't like trolls.
It was a lot of fun. I love Troll Hunter. It's a found
For
footage.
all of you future trolls out there, I don't like trolls.
No, this is like old school Scandinavian, giant
not
trolls.
internet trolls?
No, not like message board trolls. So, anyway, the movie adaptation, it came out in 2019. It adapts some of the best stories in the book. The one about the scarecrow is the one with the toe, aforementioned. I'm sorry, I can't remember the titles, but it's it's a really good adaptation. Along the lines of Poltergeist, it skirts the line, I think, of like, ooh, is this too much? But without really going over. It's a good teen movie, good introduction. I highly recommend the book as well. If you have kids, it's a great way to get them sort of spooked and intrigued, again, without going too overboard, because it is a children's book. It's not over the top, but it's legit scary. They're good campfire tales. And just one last thing about the director. He's working on a long gestating project, The Last Voyage of the Demeter. I've been reading about this movie for like 20 years. It's been in development. It's going to be a fictionalized account of the ship the Demeter, which in Bram Stoker's Dracula was the doomed ship that brought Dracula from his hometown, from Transylvania to London. And anyone who's read the book or seen the movie knows that the Demeter rolls into harbor empty, just with Dracula's coffin. The crew's gone. So this is going to be an account of what happened, and I'm guessing what happened wasn't great for the crew. It's only one chapter, and it's one of the more terrifying ones, in my opinion, because it's written from the captain's perspective as his crew dwindles down, and he starts to suspect that the cargo they're hauling is cursed or something. It's really Dracula feeding on them. So,
well, that's excellent. I actually have some
scary stories to tell in the dark.
I love it. I have some books to recommend too.
Do it.
I mean, okay. One is a book and one is a short story, or maybe it's a novella. I think it's a short story. Yes, it is. So they're both by the same author, Shirley Jackson.
Nice.
Who I love.
Can't go wrong there.
She is not a contemporary. I would say she's like a 19th or
20th century.
19
Falls in the modern
Yeah, yeah.
era,
Mhm.
but yeah, 20th century. So for Gen Z, not so much.
Right. Yeah. When I say these dates, you're going to be like, oh, that's, like, wow, I didn't even know that existed.
No, it's legit like 100 years ago.
Yeah. So the first is a book. It's called We've Always Lived in a Castle, 1962. It was actually Shirley Jackson's final written work. It's about Maricat Blackwood and her older sister Constance.
Those are just some top-notch names right there.
1962 names.
Constance.
And their ailing Uncle Julian. They live in a large house, a really isolated place. There's a nearby village. The villagers don't treat them very well, the Blackwoods. Constance hasn't left the home or the property in 6 years.
At least she's consistent. Cut that.
There were many people that were part of the Blackwood family that are no longer with them. And so the villagers treat Maricat, because she goes into town. Julian is confined to a wheelchair, but Maricat goes into town. Yeah, he's dying.
He's ailing.
Julian, he's in a wheelchair, and he obsessively writes and rewrites his memoirs. And Constance is essentially his caretaker. And Maricat is the one that goes into town, and everybody in the town gives her terrible looks, cruelty. She's just treated really terribly by the town. So there's some agoraphobia that it deals with, otherness. There's an unreliable narrator. All of Jackson's works really create an atmosphere of strangeness and intimacy with everyday evil. So again, you have this like small, isolated town. And then a new cousin comes to live at the Blackwood home. And then everything becomes revealed. So I don't want to give anything away. Just pick it up. It's a great and not too long of a read.
Yeah.
I know it's been made into, movies and things like that, but honestly, this work is meant to be read, and it should be.
That's the nice thing about Shirley Jackson
is
she's it's not going to be a terrific commitment on your part, and you can literally throw a dart at her bibliography.
Anything
Just
is
pick
up anything.
Worth your time. Yeah.
And then the second recommendation, the Shirley Jackson recommendation, is a short story called The Lottery.
I was hoping it was going to be that.
Absolutely. It was originally published in The New Yorker in June 1948. Think Hunger Games, but without the glam. It's a short story, obviously. It's
without Ziggy Stardust with rage issues.
Yeah, I mean, there's no like romance in this book. Yeah. There's no, but it does have that sort of, chosen tribute volunteer.
Yeah, it's sacrifice.
You don't volunteer
right?
for the lottery, though. So it takes place in a fictional small town, and they observe an annual tradition known as the lottery, in which members of the community are selected by chance. And because of the violent nature of the story's conclusion, the New Yorker received negative responses that resulted in canceled subscriptions and hate mail.
Wow. I mean, I'm so glad that as a society we've moved past that sort of reaction to literature and art.
mean, it is really I can't recommend The Lottery enough. I mean, if you want to see if Shirley Jackson is for you, just pick it up. It'll take you no time to read it.
There's a reason why a lot of us read that in school.
Yeah, we really did read it in school, because I read it in probably junior high, I would say. And then I, again, adapted it in college in my storytelling class. I told it as if it was... Coming up on a future
pod, ladies and gentlemen, a live reading.
I told it as if it happened... that was what my upbringing was.
Nice.
I come from this small town, and every year I have to go back. So you basically told a story as if it was your own, and that was the story I told.
Old concept. I mean, you're talking about Mesoamerican cultures that sacrifice to gods for fertility or agriculture. And
well, we're not giving anything away because this was published in 1948.
Yeah.
So just
Do
give
we
it a
need
read.
to do a spoiler warning on things that are
I
like
mean,
80, 90 years old?
I just want people to read it. Is
Okay,
all.
yeah.
Read, people. Read. And listen to this podcast.
It's a
and then
horror
read.
story called The Lottery in a small town.
And I did say
Figure
it's
it out.
like Hunger Games without the glam.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we're leading you there. It's worth a read. It'll take you like a day.
what about you? What's your
Do I
final
have-
recommendation?
Do I have a final recommendation?
Mm-hmm.
I do, don't I? It is TV. And we're talking about, it came out in 2018 on Netflix. It's The Haunting of Hill House by
Shirley Jackson.
Shirley Jackson.
I mean, we did not
The book.
do this on purpose.
No, we didn't plan that. We barely know each other. We usually spend time in separate luxury
Exactly.
properties.
Yes. Speaking of which, I have to take the yacht to our off coast
okay. Well,
luxury
I'll-
condo later.
I will be taking the rocket to our orbital station then. So anyway, getting back, wanted to round it out with a TV recommendation. And originally I was going to go with something and then remembered we're trying to introduce people to horror. So when we get to maybe a more hardcore episode, I'll have more TV recommendations. But for today, The Haunting of Hill House came out on Netflix 2018, based on the book by Shirley Jackson. However, I'll say it's loosely based on the book by Shirley Jackson.
Well, it's definitely a contemporary representation of a very classic.
You can and should read the book. It's totally worth it. Then watch the series and you'll have a completely different experience. It's different enough. So it's got so it's written and directed by Mike Flanagan, who you're going to be hearing a lot about on this podcast. He's a real
we're big
modern
fans.
master. And this was the series that brought him, I think, into the Netflix fold. Obviously, he followed it up with Haunting of Bly Manor, and then with the incredible Black Mass.
Midnight Mass.
Midnight Mass, excuse me. Midnight Mass, which was oh God. But that's another topic. So something I like about Mike Flanagan is he's got his murderer's row, his cast of characters that he carries with him from project to project. He's got Carla Gugino and Henry Thomas.
From A River Runs Through It.
Yeah. and E.T.
Way back. Oh,
obviously.
yeah, E.T. Was he in A River Runs Through It? Yeah.
That
he
was
was the
River
youngest.
Phoenix, I think.
No.
No?
Nope.
Am I just saying that because of River?
Yes.
Okay. My David Strathairn was in that. Maybe
It doesn't matter. But
so anyway.
also Victoria Pedretti, who, for those of you who watch with Penn Badgley,
and Haunting
also
of Bly
on
Manor, yeah.
Netflix. She's
Victoria Pedretti.
She's a very scary character.
It's well cast. Everybody is great. But the thing about Haunting of Hill House is it is absolutely terrifying. It is legit frightening. And in a sort of classic way. It's not gory. It's not gooey. Not that there's anything wrong with that. As we've established before, I like gooey horror. This is gothic. It's classic. It really is honest to the source material in that it's very classic haunted house stuff, but presented through the lens of a deeply broken and traumatized family.
And there is this depth of emotion and heartbreak to this that I hadn't really experienced in a horror show like this. I mean, I cried.
Oh, but like deep cried. Like when you watch This Is Us.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Listen,
I just
This
saying,
Is Us
I always
is not
know
a
when
horror.
it's on because your crying hits like a certain timbre that like I think you only get when you're watching that show.
yeah.
But no,
get
for
me every
real,
time.
Haunting of Hill House has a pathos to it that it will just rip your heart out. It's largely, it's entirely centered really around the history and the present situation of this deeply broken family that is in constant conflict with each other. They don't communicate, and a lot of the horror that's visited upon them is self-induced. These are prisons and nightmares that they've created for themselves. Also, legit supernatural forces at work for
There
sure.
is
Annabeth
also
Gish is in it. It is just, it's a beautiful story, but Victoria Pedretti's arc especially is heartbreaking.
It is.
And like nightmare inducing.
Yeah. I mean, it's scary, but it's not like a violent slasher. So.
It has a good mix of jump scares, scaring you in the moment and raising your heart rate, but also it sticks with you.
And you could take one episode at a time, which is a really good thing about
it's a show that yeah, you can binge it, but I don't recommend that. It's something that it deserves to be digested. It deserves time. But it's a really good way for people who aren't typical horror fans to get into it, because so much of it is a well-crafted and well-acted family drama that is relatable on many levels, deals with loss and grief and interpersonal conflict and poor communication.
And why can't those cinematic qualities be elements of horror?
I mean, how many of you have gone home after a period of time to have a reunion or Thanksgiving dinner or something, and you felt very scared?
Or you fall into those, coping mechanisms and familial dynamics that don't allow you to really express your personal traumas.
And the damage that does to people, and how that damage ripples outwards and affects other people and is, across generations. It's really well represented in the show, but also shown on its own and as an allegory for, supernatural terrors that are legit fucking terrifying.
And there's like scary. One particular episode that's so heartbreaking,
I know
but
exactly
there's
what
also
you're talking
one
about.
scene that is so scary.
Maybe the scariest thing.
Oh my goodness.
It's like, if I could put that one episode as a movie, it would be in my top 10.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I mean, that's great. I hope we've given you some forays.
I feel like we did.
I think so too.
And to get you started anyway.
Anything,
right?
Just try something. Read a short story. Watch an episode of a TV series. Try a movie out,
The point is there's definitely something out there for you. Horror is such a wide, inclusive genre that, I mean, outwardly, yeah, it's scary and can be gross and filled with terrible things, but you can
find beauty in it. You can find
solidarity, community,
absolutely,
representation. There is something for everybody, because fear is universal. We're all scared of something, and a lot of us are scared of the same things.
And again, you can control this type of fear.
Yeah, you can turn it off. You can take the headphones off. Absolutely.
Put hand over your eyes.
You can be a grown-ass man screaming at a TV like me.
Well, thank you, listener. We really appreciate you downloading this.
Mail.
And join us for future episodes.
Does that happen anymore? Checks in mail. The Venmo is being Venmo'd.
Yeah, right.
Brought to you by Venmo.
We'd love to sponsor you, Venmo, or vice versa. We'd love Venmo to sponsor us.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you all so much. And we'll see you next time.
Welcome to our inaugural episode of Terror in Tandem.
And we'll see you next time.
And we'll see you next time.